Hello, my Spiritist friends. Luis Lima here, directly from Florida, Central Florida. Welcome to Kardec Radio, and welcome to our program, Spiritism, a closer look. And we are talking about evolution. Huge topic, takes a long time, so that's why we're going to be here for quite a few weeks. This is our program number 5. On the first 4 programs, we had a lot of information. We're going to talk about some of them today. And we had some questions, some comments, and actually we encourage you to participate with us. You can always send your comments and questions to kardecradio.com. You can just go there, fill out our form, and we will get the information from you. We do a question every week. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then we develop the subject for the week, and at the end of the day, at the end of the program, we give you another question for another week for you to work on and cast your answers, and we're going to show you how. So let's get started. As always, we start by showing the question for the week before and the correct answer. So last week, that was the question here. According to Spiritist Codification, what forms the Universal Trinity? Okay? All right, so we got some options here. Number 1, God, fluid, elements, and imponderable matter. No. Universal cosmic fluid, material principle, and spiritual principle. No, because universal cosmic fluid and material principle are bonded together. They are basically the same thing. God, spirit, and matter. And yes, that would be the correct answer, by the way, God, spirit, and matter. And we got 2 more options here, spiritual principle, ponderable matter, and imponderable matter. We kind of briefly mentioned that last week, that when we talk about ponderable matter and imponderable matter, we're actually talking about the different types of matter within the planetary fluid. We explained that last week. We're going to go back to that a little further down our course here. And we had a last option, so you really should study question 27 in the Spirit's book. A lot of times we put something like this as an option to the question to create incentive, to encourage you to really go back to the literature, Spiritist Codification or additional literature, to really, I'm not going to say force you to study, we can't do this, but to encourage you to study and participate with us. Your participation is always welcome. We're always here to work together. We are learning just as much as you are as well. Okay, so that would have been the question for last week. Spirit, matter, and gods, that forms the Universal Trinity. Okay? All right, so for today, what we are going to do is this. We received a lot of questions, suggestions, and comments, talking to different people. And so what we did is we took all this information that came from you guys, and we compiled everything. And we decided today to kind of answer those questions or comments and suggestions. They are all from the first 4 meetings that we had here online in Kardec Radio. This is number 5, like I said. So let's go back and then see what people are saying, what they were asking or willing to have more information on. So I got a list here that I compiled with all of that. So first thing, several people came back and said, well, you discussed about Darwin and Spiritism and trying to align both of them. And there were some people concerned that they didn't quite grasp how we Spiritists and Darwin align or don't. Okay, so they were asking me to elaborate a little bit more. Well, we're going to do this the simple way because we're not going to repeat the class itself. So let's try to do a straight answer as straight as I can. Okay, Darwin and Spiritism. Okay, Darwin had it right. He, by the way, let me just rephrase this. Darwin puts his work out before Gregor Mendel. Gregor Mendel is the father of genetics. So when Darwin published his works, we didn't know anything about genetics. With the works of Mendel, things were blended together, both of them. And this, instead of we call Darwinism, which is the original ideas from Darwin, we call neo-Darwinism, which is Darwin plus Mendel. Okay, so when I say Darwin now, I'm actually saying neo-Darwinism. Okay, what do they say? What is neo-Darwinism telling us in terms of, if you consider a theory of evolution? They're saying everything is based on mutations. Mutations will create new species, will modify, genes and things that will create a brand new species out of an existing species. And the problem is, the theory is okay until then, but the problem is they cannot explain these mutations. So for them, for neo-Darwinists, such as it was for Darwin himself as well, these mutations are random. They just take place. They are accidents. And that's not in line with Spiritism. Spiritism has a black and white answer on this thing. Evolution is in two worlds. Okay? Famous book by Spirit Andre Luiz. Evolution in two worlds. So the random or the accidents that they refer to are actually things that were triggered from the spiritual realm. So mutations, yes, that's right. That's how things evolve. But the explanation about that being an accident is not what we embrace as Spiritists. So that's us, Spiritists and Darwin. Okay. All right. Also, in a very similar way, we had several people making comments and coming to us about one of the other theory of evolutions by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He created something that today we call Lamarckism, which is similar to Darwin and Darwinism. So we call Lamarckism, and it was a different theory of evolution. And the question was, or the general comment was, how do we align? Because we touched that briefly last week, and people were just asking to elaborate a little bit more. So again, trying to be very straightforward as much as I can on this. Lamarckism. Lamarck uses the same basic concept of Darwin, which is there is evolution. Species generate, they evolve. Now, the way they evolve and the reason why they evolve is not the same as Darwin, okay? Lamarck considers that the environment calls for a change. So the living organisms will adapt to these changes. They will adapt to the environment, They will adapt to the environment, generating then changes in general, and that's how species evolve. Now, one thing that he could not answer is, how come? How for example, one of the big things evolving around the Lamarckism is the neck of the giraffe. That's a big question for all of us in humanity, I think, right? So how did an animal, because it's not only the length of the neck, the entire body, the entire structure has to be different to support that. So, so the neck, which is like this, it's not really vertical, it has an angle. If there's not such a thing as a right structure, the neck would fall, the head would fall. It would be very hard for the animal to, maintain its structure. So for Lamarck, there was a typical and classical event on evolution. How does it happen? And his answer is, it's coming from the necessity that the animals, or past animals, or the ancestors had, that they wouldn't have to do like this to get their food out of the tree, the leaves that were up on the trees. That's the explanation from Lamarck. Now, there's the next level is, okay, so now here I am, the giraffe has a limited lifetime. So the giraffe, during that lifetime, it keeps doing this and this and this and this. When the animal dies, what happens? This, the idea that the neck is growing, that does not get passed to the offsprings. It doesn't. So how does that get passed? He couldn't explain at the time, and that kind of was a little complicated to sustain his theory. And his theory, with time, it died because too many people didn't agree with that. They were criticizing, and to a certain level, then Lamarckism just simply died. Coming back to it, how do we explain that? Well, if we think about the materialistic paradigm, things happen only on the material plane. So this animal here, okay, has its neck a little bit longer at a certain point of his life compared to day one, and it's going to pass to its offspring. This doesn't pass to this one because it's not at the cell level. That is a learning behavior. If the animal has to do this all the time to get its food, it will keep doing this, and it becomes a learning behavior. At one point, the animal is not going to have to think, how can I get food? Let me look around and see if there's something on the ground here. The animal will naturally just go for it like this. To a certain point, that this idea, this behavior gets automated into a perispirit. And then when this animal, further down the road, that perispirit is going to create a new body, what happens is the new body carry the learning behavior, the learned behavior. And then you will produce an animal with a slightly longer neck, and then so and so and so many times over, and then we have a different species or a modified species. But it was an accident. For Lamarck, there is no such a thing as accident. He just could not explain how one thing evolves into the other. And with the idea of reincarnation, perispirit, spiritual world, and all of these things that I summarized here, that becomes clear. That's completely feasible now. It's a black and white explanation for this thing. So that's what I wanted to say about Lamarck. So we touched briefly on Darwinism and Spiritism, Lamarckism and Spiritism. And let's go for the next thing that we had a lot of comments on, which is if we can briefly rephrase the differences between, I got my list here, creationism and evolutionism. Okay, so let's make it clear. Evolutionism embraces the idea that one thing generates the other one. Species will generate different species. There is evolution, things change. Creationism is different. Man or humans were created as they are today. Animals were created as they are today. There is no such a thing as one species transforms into another, mutates into another, or with the learning behavior becomes another. No such a thing. In creationism, everything just happened just like this. Snap of fingers. That is the very basic difference between evolutionism and creationism. So you yourself, you're listening to us here, if you believe that there is some sort of evolution, that a giraffe came from a different animal, that a dog came from one type of dog, came from a different type of dog, all of that, anything, if you believe that, you are evolutionist, not creationist. That's the basic difference. For us Spiritists, which one do we follow? We touched on that on our first meeting. We are evolutionists. Now, when you talk about evolutionism, there are several different theories that try to attempt to explain all of that. Darwin is one of the theories. Lamarck is another one. Um, Irreducible complexity is another one, and so and so. There are several of them. The difference between them is the explanation, how they justify that things are happening. And none of them comply 100% with Spiritism because none of them look at the other plane. They are all materialistic explanations of evolution. They are working at the plane, material plane. There is no evolution in another plane. Spiritual, there is no spirit, nothing like this. So all these theories, they will be away from us in that sense. Evolution is in two worlds. By the way, us Spiritists, we can never forget about that. The name of the book, Evolution in Two Worlds. If you take the second world out of the picture, meaning if you take the spiritual world out of the picture, things get very complicated, very rough to be explained, and we're not going to be able to come up with a full understanding of how things happened and still happen. This evolution is still going. It never stops. Okay. Let's keep going here. We had another question / comment about the vital principle. We explained how the how the spiritual principle develops. It goes through a different stage when he learns how to infuse life into matter, and that point is the vital principle. So there is a couple of things here, a couple of people asking me to elaborate a little bit more on vital principle. Well, vital principle is our next meeting, next class, entirely dedicated to that. We're going to speak about maybe 40-45 minutes about that, trying to go as deep as we can with a vocabulary that's not too complex, not too complicated, not too technical, not too weird, I would say. Sometimes, different people use different words and it gets confused. So this is going to be the subject of our entire next meeting, our meeting number 6. So if you're one of those who were commenting on vital principle, please stick around. See us next week, and we'll be touching on that as well. Okay, and here's another one. Universal cosmic fluid. We spoke about that last week. And the study of fluids in general, universal cosmic fluid, is at the top level. It's very long. This is, we have seminars on this, and the seminars are long as 8 hours, 7 hours, because it's a very long subject. This is not really the topic for us in this evolution course or set of meetings. However, I had to touch on that because it shows us briefly and a very, very, very simple overview on how things evolve, how the universal cosmic fluid gets transformed by the intelligent principle, and that's how the whole creation takes place, by modifications of this universal fluid time after time after time, in a sequence of, we can call sequence of layers, if you will, where things are getting progressively modified until you get to the most modified type, which is what we on Earth call the material plane or inert matter. Our chairs, even our bodies, right? They use, we have physical cells. Those are the most modified type of universal cosmic fluid. Each planet, each orb has its own planetary fluid. So Earth has its planetary fluid. The fluid in Jupiter is different than ours. That's their planetary fluid. Saturn, same thing, it's a different one. So each planet has its own planetary fluid. The planetary fluid is a modification. It comes from all the way up from the universal cosmic fluid, and it keeps coming down and down and down, layer after layer, being modified until you get to the planet's level. And that's what the planetary fluid is. Within the planetary fluid for planet Earth, we Humans here in the planet, we are able to modify it uh, in two ways. The matter that we see here, that's something feasible, that's what we call the brute matter, and or ponderable matter, and imponderable matter, which is the matter that belongs to the planetary fluid, but we don't see it. We cannot perceive that matter with our five senses. We need another type of detector to perceive those fluids and that imponderable matter. So five senses for anything that happens in the material plane. Chakras or vital centers or force centers for anything that we perceive coming from the spiritual world. Okay, so that was really all we wanted to talk about fluids, because then we're going to go into several months talking about fluid, and we're going to divert from the purpose of this particular course, which is evolution. Okay? All right, and I'm going to touch on something else here that we also had a comment on. The difference between spiritual principle and intelligent principle. You see, these names sometimes we get confused about these names, but in very simple words, the spiritual principle, it's something generated by the divine plasma. That's God himself generates what we call spiritual principle. By the way, what is a principle? Right? Principle is something that is, let's say, in latent state. It's waiting to be used, waiting to be happening, waiting for something. It's almost like a latent state. That's what the word principle means. So spiritual principle means something that is latent. One day is going to be spirit, but it isn't yet. Okay, so this spiritual principle, which is coming right out of the divine plasma, will learn how to interact with the material principle, which is inside the universal cosmic fluid. It will learn how to deal with that. As it goes along, it learns how to deal with that. It will progress. It will do more. Next day, imagine you learning how to do like a Lego blocks. That's the example that I used. So on the first days, the kid can probably put 3 or 4 together. On the next day, they will put more. So every day you are able to do a little bit more. You're advancing daily when it comes to like a Lego blocks. Same for the spiritual principle. It will advance with time, little by little, as it can, as it learns, operating the basic elements of matter. Okay, the basic elements of matter, the basic structure of matter is studied not by spiritists, but by quantum physicists. Quantum mechanics and quantum physics, that's what they study. Subparticles of the atom and all of that. We touched on that too, but it's not for us to do a full-blown course on that. So coming back to the idea, the spiritual principle starts to learn and keeps learning on how to interact with the material principle to a certain point where now it's ready to kind of graduate, to go to the next level, which is use that matter that now he knows how to move around and infuse life into this. When the spiritual principle is able, or graduated, if you will, right, to infuse life into the material principle, then it gets a new name, per se, and we call it intelligent principle. So intelligent, the word intelligent, is associated in Spiritism, in all this thing, is associated with the ability of having life. So the intelligent principle now knows how to infuse life into inorganic matter, making it organic matter. That's when it receives the name intelligent principle, and it's not going to stop learning. You will just keep going through the different kingdoms. It goes through the plants kingdom, animal kingdoms. That's something we're going to do later on, much later in a lot of details. We're going to explore this avenue in a lot of details. But that's, in short words, in a few words, that would be the difference between the spiritual principle and the intelligent principle. Okay. Well, like I said in the beginning, all these things came from you guys who are sharing with us all this experience. We appreciate your comments and questions. And next week, we are going to talk about, we are going to go into the next level of things. We are going to speak about the vital principle. Okay? At the end of the program, as always, I bring you to the question of the week. Wow, we could easily call it Spirit Trivia. What is Spirit Trivia? Well, if you're watching the link here, down here, you can use, if you're on your computer, you can use the barcode, the QR code on the top left of your screen. It will take you to this website. It's not really a website, it's just a page where you can cast your answer. Once again, I like to be very clear about this, very straightforward. We do not collect names. You're not required to put in names. You're not even asked for the option to. So we don't collect any names. We don't collect IP addresses. We don't collect email addresses, nothing, phone numbers, cell numbers, nothing like this. It's just for you to be able to participate with us, to have the opportunity to, to bring also these questions. Sometimes they bring a lot of content to the next meeting, and that's what I really encourage you to do. So go ahead and make use of our Spirit Trivia and cast your answer. Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much. I'll be here next week, and we are going to discuss a vital principle. So thank you very much, and until next time.